Hi everyone, this is Josh Rosowski, your instructor for Ethical Public Service, and today we're going to talk a little bit about administrative ethics. Now, I'm not going to go over every slide. On Blackboard, you can actually click on and look at the slides individually, but the slides really follow the format of the textbook. So I'm just going to go to a couple slides that I really want to highlight and talk about them with a little more detail. So let's start with a discussion about what is ethics. And if we look up a definition of ethics, we see that it says that it's moral principles that govern a person's or a group's behavior. And so, though that's vague, depending on what group of people and what they find important, morals can change. So we can even see that between cultures, differences in what they perceive as being moral and not moral. Now, in this class, we're going to be talking specifically about something that's called administrative ethics. And here, it's going to be ethics that applies to people who work in government and a nonprofit organization. And this is important to have this distinction because there is different expectations for people who work in government compared to those who work in business. So, for example, in business, it's okay to take clients out, pay for dinners, take them to um, movies or plays. That's part of the culture. But to do that same thing with a government employee would be highly unethical. So there are differences in expectations. Now, as public administrators, we serve a variety of different groups of people. Um, and these can kind of be thought of as four categories. The first is that we serve individuals or the public. So the public who needs our public service, we're serving them. We're also accountable to the people that promote the public interest. We're also responsible to organizations. And lastly, we're responsible to political superiors and to uphold the law. So we serve all these different people, groups, and organizations. And this is what kind of makes government more complex than business. Businesses tend to, their primary goal is to make money, whereas in government, we serve a lot of people, a lot of different interests, and sometimes those interests are in direct opposition of each other. But yet we still have to find a way to make it work. One thing that I think is important to talk about is sort of the overview of this course. And by stating that, this class is not going to teach a correct way to behave. Um, Instead, what it's really going to do is it's going to help organize our thoughts about ethics. It's also going to understand sources of ethics and their linkages between personal values and those of the public service. And lastly, to heighten awareness of ethics and public duty in the public sector. So really, we're going to be spending a lot of time figuring out sort of this process, this method that will help us to unravel ethical dilemmas and come up with ways to solve them. In next week's module, we're going to be talking about the ethics triangle, which is the method that we're going to be using in this class to solve ethical dilemmas. But let me give you just a little bit of a understanding about what this ethical triangle is. So basically, if we think about a triangle, it has three sides. And the three sides of the triangle are virtues, principles, and benefits to society. In the center of that triangle is what we do. It's our work. It's and Savara terms this duties. So these are the behaviors expected of a person in a certain role, which in this case would be government. But it's those three sides that are basically, I like to think of them as lenses that we can use to look at different parts of an ethical dilemma. So virtues are the qualities that define what a good person is. So examples of these are our morals. We should be trustworthy. We should be um, a good person. Principles are going to be more like the laws and rules, the things that are written down that define what and how we should do as government officials. And then the last lens, benefits to society, which some people also call the greatest good. Really, what that's all about is maximizing the amount of public service we can give to the public. So it's actions that produce the greatest good for the greatest number of people. So each of these has a is going to give us different answers and help unravel different elements of an ethical dilemma that will give sort of a more nuanced and way to solve complex ethical dilemmas. Another way that we can look at this triangle is by using the four dimensions of these sources of ethics and expressing them in a form of a question. So when we're thinking about duty, we can ask the question, what are the expectations of persons holding public office? For virtue, we would ask the question, what are the qualities of a good person, or what would a good person do? For principle, it's about what is the right thing to do. And then for consequences, or the greatest good, what is the most beneficial action to take? So each of these provides a different thing. Virtue is going to tell us about what a good person should do. Principle really is the law and legally what we're required to do. And then greatest good is all about how can we create the greatest amount of public good for the people. Some additional statements based on virtue. So these are some things that what is virtue? So a virtuous person will display honesty, show integrity, they'll be respectful, they're consistent, and they're going to avoid improprieties. In the textbook, Savara lists many more, and I urge you to take a look at that list. And as you're analyzing your ethical dilemma through the lens of virtue, to take a look at that and think about each of those categories. The next side of the triangle is principle, and statements based on principle include following the laws, policies, or regulations that are part of your government agency, acting with fairness, treating all people equally, protecting confidential information, and not lying. Earlier, we talked about a definition for ethics, but Savara gives us in this chapter a definition for administrative ethics, and I think it's important to go over this because this really is what this whole class is about, is this administrative ethics. So I'll just read the definition. Administrative ethics refer to well-based standards of right and wrong that prescribe what public administrators ought to do in terms of duty to public service, principles, virtues, and benefits to society. So in that definition is included the ethics triangle, with principles, virtues, and benefits to society being those three sides of that triangle. So we'll use this definition throughout this course. In this chapter, Savara also talks about ethics, morality, and law. And it's useful to spend a little time and think about each one of these topics because they each are going to help guide us on what to do when faced with an ethical dilemma. So morality is talking about a sense of right and wrong based on personal upbringing and commitment to values of a variety of groups. Ethics is talking about standards of right and wrong behavior accepted by members of a professional group. And morality and ethics can conflict when one's personal beliefs contradict what one is expected to do as a professional. And the relationships between these things are complex. Sometimes they even contradict each other. So what is immoral is not necessarily illegal. And dishonesty is not illegal except in some situations. So there may be situations where you really can't tell somebody something because of confidential reasons or whatever. So it's not that you're lying; you just can't tell them certain things. Some laws control behaviors that are not immoral. So an example of this is driving over the speed limit. It's not immoral; it's just against the law to do that. And some laws violate ethical principles. So we all know of laws that unfairly benefit one group over another. And not breaking the law is not necessarily the same thing as being ethical. So So these relationships make this stuff complex. You can be lawful, but also be unethical. And so we all know situations where that can take place. So when confronted with these complex relationships where um, one thing will tell us to do one thing and another will tell us to do another, it can be complex, and we may not know what one should do in this type of situation. Um, there are times when, as public professionals, we may be required to do something that goes against our own senses of morality. And when these situations happen, Savara asks, "What should we do?" And um, basically, at the end of the day, he suggests that if we cannot uh, find a way to do that, then we should perhaps think about leaving our job, and then trying to perhaps change the policy through a political process. Um, and though I think this makes sense at a sort of a theoretical level, on a practical perspective, um, people don't always have that ability just to quit a job because of their beliefs, and so they may feel forced to do things that they feel are immoral. So the ethical dilemmas are complex, and as we talk about this topic throughout the semester, we'll find some techniques on how we can um, deal with some of these complexities, and sometimes it'll result in finding sort of a creative way where we can still do what's required of us, but do it in a way um, where we support our own morals and our own beliefs. So that's all I have for um, these slides. I encourage you to please read the entire chapter, and I wish you good luck on the quiz this week. So thank you and have a good day.